Better thinking, faster decisions, bigger ROI. This is the Finding 12 Minutes podcast. The idea is simple. If you can find 12 minutes of efficiency in your day, you will gain an hour every week, and that changes how we work. Each episode is focused on practical ways to use AI, technology, and smarter strategies to help you move faster, think clearer, and get more done with less effort. So let's find your 12 minutes. So we bought the AI licenses, but the question then becomes, where's the ROI? AI is a cost center when it's used to do the same work, but only slightly faster. But when does it become a profit center? Well, it becomes a profit center when it's used to increase revenue, improve utilization, accelerate delivery, improve win rates, create new services. So I hear the same question every week. We spent money on Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, some other AI tool, but the executives come back and say, where's the return? And that's a fair question. Most organizations have invested in AI. Few can actually point to any measurable financial results. And I think the reason is pretty simple. Most companies are measuring AI like it's software, like it's an IT expense. Leaders getting results are measuring AI like it's a business initiative. That's cost center thinking. And that cost center thinking sounds like, how many licenses did we buy? How much did we spend? How much time did we save? Those are useful metrics, but they aren't really business metrics. Saving 5 minutes on an email doesn't change a company, doesn't really change revenue either. Saving 5 minutes that allows the proposal team to submit 2 more pursuits a month might. So the difference is connecting the activity to the outcome, the real ROI equation. There are a handful of ways that AI that can measure business value. One is increased revenue, increased utilization or your billable rates, increased win rates, improved deliverability speed, improve customer experience, create products and services, or anything else that is like that intermediate metric. So a practical example would be if you focus on proposals. Most firms use AI to draft proposal content. It's kind of a given. It's what has been happening for the last several years. More and more firms are getting comfortable with that. And you know what? That's fine. Not an issue. And I actually agree with that. But the question isn't, did AI write part of the proposal? The question needs to become, did AI help us pursue more opportunities? The question then becomes, did it reduce technical staff's involvement? Did it improve consistency? Did it increase our win rate? And those are all great questions, but that's the true value of where AI is going to have the return, and it's going to help you kind of future-proof these things. So if the answer is yes, AI is now contributing to revenue, that becomes a different story. That's a different narrative. It's no longer, are we investing in AI or it's an AI expense, treating it like an IT expense. It becomes more of a conversation of how does it drive additional revenue for my firm? So a practical example, when you think about it from a business development perspective, most business development teams use AI for research. If they're not using it for research, obviously it's a huge miss. But using it for research is a great way to be better prepared to understand and pursue and win work. So a stronger use case is creating a repeatable opportunity of intelligence across your whole process. Can AI analyze your clients, your competitors, markets, even funding sources, like where's the money for these projects coming from? Can it actually look at community involvement or community sentiment? Absolutely. Pursuit history is another great area. So when you think about these AI tools and you think about what they're actually doing, at least from a business development perspective, utilizing the data that you have to make better decisions and be more proactive versus reactive is what's going to actually help improve this whole concept of generating an ROI from the investments in these tools. So now that your team isn't just researching faster, that really kind of pivots them to making better decisions. Should I pursue this? Should I not pursue this? I do know that most firms struggle with that concept of go, no go. There's either usually a spreadsheet or a scorecard. They kind of, subjectively kind of select some numbers and they come up with, and they can justify, any pursuit for any reason. Oh, we're doing this for strategic reasons. We're doing this for a variety of different reasons. But this research helps solidify some of that. So not only are you making better decisions, you're tying it directly to creating revenue. So we look at another practical example. When you start thinking about say, service delivery. This is where many firms are kind of missing, probably the biggest opportunity. If AI helps deliver projects faster, AI helps improve quality, reduce rework, increase throughput, you've essentially have created capacity. And when your business is kind of built around this concept of heads and hours, capacity becomes revenue. The more heads and the more hours that you have, the more that you can build, the more you're going to make from a revenue perspective. This is fundamentally different than simply reducing effort. So if you think about how do you future-proof your investment, this is where I would challenge all of you to be thinking about. The future isn't in your prompts. It isn't necessarily in the research. It's not in the models. The future's not even in the investment or the licensing. The future really revolves back to this concept of data. So every organization should be asking themselves a series of different questions. What knowledge do we own? Where does it live? How do we access it? Does it make sense to have AI on top of that? Another question that most companies or organizations should be asking themselves is that where is the institutional expertise that we're capturing? What is it and where is it? We have this whole gray wave that they're talking about, that there's going to be this huge flood of retirements in the next decade or so. How are you capturing that information? Where is that, when that person retires or leaves the organization, does all that expertise walk out the door? AI can kind of help with that. And that's when you talk about future proofing the things that you do. This is where it's really going to help. The other questions that you could be asking yourself is like, what processes can be standardized? When you think about when we think about innovation, we always think about tool. We always think about something physical. We always think about investment of money, but sometimes investment in time, just fixing the existing processes and understanding how they are and how they work and what they deliver can really drive an innovative mindset and culture within the organization. You got to stop asking yourself or saying that we do this because this is how we've always done it. And I think that is like the death of most organizations when it comes to process improvement. What information creates competitive advantage is another great question. So you look at all the data sets that you have, everything that's created within your organization and everything that you do within your organization. What information do you have that kind of creates that competitive advantage? Everyone can replicate services, service delivery. We could do everything that your competitors can do and vice versa. So now it comes down to how do you create that competitive advantage? Sometimes it's speed, sometimes it's people, but even those could be replicated and stolen. If someone's going to come in and start poaching your employees, your competitive advantage around people diminishes. But information is not something that's easily obtainable, and that does create a very unique competitive advantage for most organizations. So companies that win won't necessarily have the best AI. Most are probably going to use whatever off-the-shelf tool that's available, say Copilot or ChatGPT. They're not necessarily going to invest in custom solutions or a custom implementation of Claude or ChatGPT. They're probably going to use whatever the base licenses that comes in with every subscription they have today. But what they will have is the best data that's connected to the best workflows. And that's going to be much harder to copy by any competition. So 3 actions for this week, and something that I want everyone to kind of be thinking about. So the first one is stop measuring AI by usage. It's not about how many people are using AI or how many licenses you have distributed using AI within your organization. You need to really start focusing on measuring business outcomes. So tying the usage to the actual outcome. It's not about using AI to write a proposal. It's all about how did you actually pursue more work? How did you write more proposals? How did you reduce the amount of time that other billable folks are contributing to those proposals so they can actually work on other things? So it's all about building capacity, but also tying it back to outcomes. It's not, again, about I use AI. It's about how it actually impacts the business longer term. The second action for this week is identify that one process that is directly tied to revenue. Not necessarily productivity, but revenue. So what are you doing today? How is AI and that process going to actually impact revenue? So we always used to say, how do we get from identification to revenue or proposal to dollars, right? So you always talk about like, it's not about the proposal itself, it's how do we actually turn that into revenue? And I think you need to be thinking about AI in that same exact way. How do you go from using AI and creating efficiencies and productivity, but connecting that exactly to revenue? And then the last thing I want us to kind of focus on this week is, start building that organizational knowledge. Where's that data living? Getting into that data mindset. Are you capturing your proposals? Are you doing project closeout the way that needs to be done? Are things in a position, in a place, in a location, in titled and named and categorized in a way that artificial intelligence can take advantage of it? You need to think about project lessons learned. You need to think about client intelligence. You need to be thinking about all of your operational processes. All those assets will outlast any AI model. So it doesn't really matter what AI you put on the top of this. You could be Chat today, you could be Claude tomorrow, you could be Copilot the day after. But doing all those three steps, focusing on outcomes, right? Identifying the one process that's connected to revenue, and then having that data capacity, data mindset is going to actually kind of create that future proofing that you need. So in closing, let's think about this and, kind of sum all this up in one fell swoop. The goal isn't to justify your AI investment. I think that most organizations think about like, I'm going to put in this and I'm going to get X out on the back end. And we're trying to figure out how to kind of shoehorn it into what we do. You need to kind of change your mindset on it and say, this investment has everything to do with how it's connected to revenue. And I think that changes the conversation. The goal is to turn AI into a business asset and not continue to think of this as an IT overhead or an overhead expenditure. So you need to be thinking about, I'm doing this for the sole reason of it actually converting into revenue. So you got to remember, find that whole concept of finding 12 minutes was really not about saving 12 minutes. It was about creating the capacity, and that capacity that turns into revenue. So organizations that win will be the ones that can convert that capacity into revenue, innovation, and then ultimately create that competitive advantage. That's how AI moves from a cost center to a profit center. See you next week. And that's your 12 minutes. If you found value in this, share it with someone who needs to work smarter, not harder. And remember, small efficiencies compound. Find 12 minutes a day and the results take care of themselves. I'll see you in the next episode.